seen.
Manufacturers. But when I didn't think I was getting a fair deal, I said. So an awful lot of men were feared for the bosses, frightened of them. They wouldn't have went up to the office for loving their money. No me, if I thought I had a complaint, I went to.
In fact, 4 times between 1790 and 1850, the weavers of this district, New Mills, Galston and Darvel, armed themselves with pikes and guns to take up arms against the government.
Whether ye cry it dour stubbornness or prude independence, it's been a characteristic of the folk in Ayrshire's Irvine Valley for a long time. Weavers by trade, thrawn by nature.
The weaver's wife sits at the fire and caws the purring wheel. She likes to hear her ingot man drive on the chateau wheel. The chateau runs, the chateau runs, the chateau runs with speed. Oh, sweetly may the chateau run that wins the Viennese breed. 3 defter threed mix up the clip until the wage he wins. And ilka weaver makes the mare the chateau runs. The chateau runs, the chateau runs, the chateau runs with speed. Oh, sweetly may the chateau run that wins the Viennese breed. He rises early in the morning, toils through late at night. He fain would independent weekends, but as is wrecked. The chateau runs.
A valley, by its nature, is inward-looking. But what it loses on being parochial, it gains in having a strong sense of community. 3 communities to be exact: Darvel for banks, New Mills for swanks, and Galston for guts. The banks and swanks are interchangeable. Both New Mills and Darvel had mean weavers and rich manufacturers in equal proportion. But both tunes relegate the guts to Galston, because for a wee while Galston was a gutsy mining tune, while the others were their own masters, or so they thought, at the weaving. We Galston folk just smile, aware of our tune's langer history in weaving, for the first Valley Websters are mentioned in our kirk records for 1560, weaving local wool into cloth as a sideline to tenant farming. This was the time religious wars were raging in France and Flanders, and it was Huguenot refugees looking for protection in a Protestant country who introduced fine weaving skills to Scotland. By the 1600s, we hear of them gaining great licht and knowledge of the calling of their native land, which they taught to the country folk all around. From then till now, weavers here have relied on a market for finer fabrics. Local tradition has it that common valley surnames such as Frame, Gebby, Howie, Skade and Fleming date from the Flemish and Huguenot immigrants of this period. Alexander Fleming, who discovered penicillin, came from a small farm over near Loudon Hill there. The immigrants introduced the advanced drawloom method of weaving, which produced a finer woolen and linen cloth. They themselves were quickly absorbed into the local population, and within a couple of generations were Lowland Scots in attitude, speech and religion. One of Scotland's own religious battles was fought here at Loudon Hill. Valley men flocked to the Covenanting cause. Among them, a blacksmith called Morton, whose descendant would revolutionise valley weaving 200 years later. In the meantime, weavers' independence was never far from the surface.
Attachment to the church dwindled away, and they became great radicals and reformers for the period right up to the mid-19th century. Many of them became joined in the Society of Friends when Thomas Muir of Hunters Hill started up the kind of reform movement just after the French Revolution. Before the 1832 Reform Bill, the weavers didn't expect the Reform Bill to go through. William Cobbett, the great leader at that time, was in Glasgow, and the New Mills weavers sent a delegation over the moor to Glasgow to invite him to New Mills to speak. He came here a few days later, and they carried him shoulder high from the bottom of the town right up to the middle of the town and gave him the freedom of the borough. He wrote later in his newspaper, which he produced every week, "I would go 1,000 miles to see these Scotchies, especially at New Mills."
The staple fabric of the weavers has changed over the centuries. In the 1800s, linen eclipsed wool because of huge investment by the new British government. Wool survives in Galston, but it was the new fabric, linen, that boosted the textile trade in the valley. Before the Union, the old Scots Parliament had some ingenious methods of promoting the linen trade, including the Deed Clays Act of 1686. It insisted that all fresh Scotch corpses be rowed in good Scotch linen before being confined in their mools. It was a difficult law to enforce, and despite the fact that ministers had to write a document stating that they had in fact adhered to the law, it was eventually revoked.
Lint mills were built on the banks of the Irvine for the preparation of a yarn that was woven into cambrics and lawns on the hand looms.
This was also the period a certain young Robert Burns was downriver at the town of Irvine, learning to dress flax and, by all accounts, to undress flax. Linen brought prosperity, and if the proud New Mills townhouse is a symbol of it, then the establishment of the new town at Derville in 1751 is its most permanent memorial.
It happened on a lammas night as I get out for a stroll. I hardly gone so very far, they done it down by the toll. I done it on and done it on till the Derville dam I did pass. And what do you think was done in there but a bonny wee servant lass? What are you gone? Give me your hand. How do you do, says I. Hold up your head, my bonny wee lass, and dinna look so shy. What do you bite? What do you stay? Come tell to me your name. Would your father no be angry noo if I was to see you?
This house belongs to one of the original plots of land feued out with the Earl of Loudon in the 1760s. It would be a two-loomed shop, with the family living on this side and the looms in against the windows on the other side. The entry led from the main street through to the huge back greens of the weavers, and their kye used to come straight through the house. To fend against slumps in the weaving, the weavers used to grow vegetables and keep dairy cattle, so they're self-sufficient in food and they could sell their products to the growing metropolis in the north. As you can see, Derville folk are still obsessed with gardens. In fact, the Mulls folk say that they have to hack up their tatties and tumshies with axies before they can get them in their shed door. And see Derville currants, when you pull them out, they're that big and long that you can hear the kye routing in Australia.
We used to work on a Saturday morning from 5 to 11 in shifts, and you used to meet the poachers with their bags over their backs coming home.
And was this just for pleasure, or was it to get food?
To get food, or a bob or two to sell them. I could tell you a wee story about the poachers. This was two old characters, they were right characters. They were in the habit of giving this old woman a rabbit every Saturday. You hear this, I think they got drunk and they hadn't been out poaching. They didn't know what to do about this. And they went and got a cat, killed it and skinned it, and gave it to the old woman. And the next Saturday when they went back, the rabbit, well, she, I hope that's as good as the one you gave me last week.
After the Napoleonic Wars, the trade declined for a while. There were a large number of ex-soldiers coming into the district and were encouraged by the government to take up weaving. The power of the old master weavers declined, in fact disappeared. The weavers were very poor after that. And if the local weavers hadn't gone into the production of fine woven cloth, linos and so on, they would never have recovered. They would have gone the same as all the other weavers in Scotland in the face of the power in production.
Were they still independent?
They were still very much independent. They were artisan weavers. They had their own looms and their own cottages. They got their yarn from the weaving agent who took in the finished cloth. For instance, this house here is a weaving agent's house. And downstairs was his ware room where he kept the yarn and the finished cloth for the manufacturers in Glasgow and Paisley. This room was his weaving loom shop. The two windows have for two looms to throw plenty of light from the south onto the looms.
How were the webs transported to Paisley and Glasgow?
The carrier carried them, collected them every week at the road end, shouting, "Och, noch for Glasgow," and he would bring out their finished webs, put them in the cart, he would take them back, and the new webs would be brought back, the yarn, to make the next process start up again.
The fashion in the year 1800 was for neoclassical gowns in white diaphanous muslin. This was in the days before the agents took over, and two new fabrics, silk and cotton, had arrived on local looms, bringing with them a brief golden age for the master weavers. To decorate the simple cotton fabric, the art of tambouring developed, the weavers' wives and daughters stretching the muslin over a wooden frame and stitching in their designs. What started as a divertissement for ladies grew into a huge industry. Flowerers, as they were called, eventually earned more than their weaver husbands, gradually developing their skills to include lace stitches and embroidery. The trade was tightly controlled by Glasgow and Paisley agents, who sent the sewers the designs stamped on the cloth, the fee due the flowerer, and the time within which she had to complete the piece. It became known as Ayrshire whitework, or Ayrshire embroidery. Despite the pressures, they managed to create beauty in ladies' collars and cuffs, babies' christening robes and bonnets. By the 1860s, the market for this embroidery had been captured by cheaper Swiss and Madeira lace, both areas inspired by the original Ayrshire work. One Scottish writer described the common sight of old women trying to sell their work in the street with the request, "Will you buy a wee bit flurin, sir?" Fortunately, there's still a few enthusiasts left in this part of Ayrshire with a love of the craft and the desire to pass it on.
Well, this has just recently been finished. I just finished it. It took me about 2 years to make it. I feel Ayrshire embroidery is like a garden. You choose your flowers, like you've got the ferns here. To me, it's the most joyous and happy embroidery. I don't think anybody who wasn't happy doing it could do it.
The slumps that killed off handloom weaving in other parts of Scotland brought hard times for the valley weavers in the middle of the 19th century, but they survived. The main reason was the luxury lino or madras curtains they specialised in were better than anything that, as yet, could be wrought in power looms. From an estimated 80,000 weavers in the mid-19th century, there's only one outpost of handloom weaving left in Scotland, here in Lithermuir, Kincardineshire, where Ian Dale and William Taylor weave fine linen double damask tableware on jacquard handlooms. Going for a specialist market like the Irvine Valley lino curtain weavers, the quality product survives because of its uniqueness. The delicate patterns in the curtains were possible because of a brilliant early computer card system invented by a Frenchman called Jacquard. Within 30 years of the invention, jacquards were adapted to valley looms by a local mechanical genius, Joseph Hood. The number of weavers actually increased for a while, but the slumps came more and more frequently, and the embargo on cotton during the American Civil War was a death blow to the native industry. The same Joseph Hood introduced the first mechanised loom to New Mills in 1864, making wincey cloth. But what the valley needed was another industrial revolution, and it took a strong man, the descendant of the Covenanting Darvel blacksmith, to propel it. Alexander Morton, a poor handloom weaver, who took on his brother-in-law's agent's business, Morton showed his enterprise at an early age. He was the first valley man to bypass the Glasgow manufacturers, finish the curtains himself, and deal directly with quality retail outlets all over Britain. It was during a selling trip to London that he saw for the first time the Nottingham lace machine at an exhibition. With the jacquard mechanism, Morton realised it could be adapted easily by the declining valley workforce and proposed a cooperative venture. But The Thrawn Derval weavers kent his father and had nae inclination to gie their hard-won siller to sic a chancey scheme. Morton, characteristically, decided to go it alone, against them and the English manufacturers. In 1875, the first Nottingham lace machine made its long journey to the Irvine Valley, beginning and ending, as in this 1930 silent film, with a jant on a horse and cart.
People that haven't seen lace looms have no idea the size of them. There are tons and tons in them. And when they came new from Nottingham, we used to need to go out and carry them in, maybe 7 8. And they were all made the length of the loom. And it was all big looms we had. And we'd come off the road, Campbell Street, and there was a dip. And see when you were coming over the dip and it come down on your shoulder. It forced you onto your knees nearly. Some people you couldn't lift them. Solid. You maybe 9 or 10 years carrying one shaft. In fact, I remember one loom they put in, they couldn't get it in the door. They knocked a hole in the wall and carried it in through the hall. Then a loom builder came up from Nottingham and put the whole thing together.
And if Morton lost weight and sweated blood till the machine finally produced cloth in this building in 1876, it didn't seem to have unduly harmed him. His castle, Gowan Bank, rose up, and the enormous wealth he created meant he didn't have to grow vegetables for his table, but as a Darvel man, his love of gardening was expressed in the pansy, and Pansy San is the name that stuck with him. The boom was on, and suddenly Pansy San had his imitators. Within 10 years, there were over 100 lace looms in the valley. The weavers of Galston, New Mills and Darvel surpassed those of Nottingham in satisfying the Empire's demand for lace furnishings.
Yes, Morton's was the main horn. And you could hear it all over the town. It blew at 6:30 in the morning, that was to get to your work. It blew at 9, went home for your breakfast. It blew at 9:20 for the shift men. They were actually in the factory eating their piece, as we called it. But then it blew at 10, get you back from your breakfast. Blew at 1, your dinner. Blew at 2, get you back into your dinner. It blew at 4 o'clock. No, yes, 4 o'clock, and then I think it was 4:10 for your smoke time. Blew at 6 o'clock night, then it blew at 6:20 for the shift men to go back in after their tea. I remember one day out in the boiler house, we were arguing about the slaves. The slaves were stupid and that for... This old man says, see, the slaves are no stupid. See, they have to whip them to their work. See, here in Darvel, see, they just blow a horn, see, and they run to their work. Well, that was a great character. Well, when you went into the mill, you started at the Raven off, what we called the Raven off, bobbin stripping. You might be on it 2 months, you might be on it 2 years. You advance for that to the shuttling. That was putting the bobbin inside what we called the carriage. It was a piecework job. You got paid per 1,000. And it was all by hand, there was no machinery. Then you progressed from that to the spooling. That was the empty spools and the spool boards. You took them off while the machine was going, tied a knot and put them back on. And as I say, in all these jobs, you could be 2 months on them, you could be... Some people were in the schooling for 10 years. And you go on to weaving when somebody died or left, or they got more machinery in. That's how you progressed. The weaving was all piece rate. Unless your loom was stopped, naturally you were on time. There was an awful lot of jobs you never got paid for. You had to change all the shuttles in your loom, that was about 3,400 of them. Put in new ones, got nothing for that. You just change a great big pattern up on the jacquards, you got nothing for that. There was one fellow, he fell when he was coming down sorting his card. He fell off the platform. Went forward to see if he was all right. See, never mind me, get the loom on. That's how they carried on.
My wee man's a weaver, he works in Shilley's Mill. He gets his pay on Friday and buys a half a jowl. He gangs to the kirk on a Sunday, a half an hour too late. He pulls a button off his shirt and puts it on a plate.
A single curtain. A net was, you just go on the pattern and worked away till you had 45 yards. and a curtain. You had to go up and put your cards on, make a border, then go back up, work your border, back up this ladder, and put in what they called the repeat. That was, all depending on what size your curtain was. You worked the repeat for a while, then you went back up and put on what they called the bottom, to make the bottom of the curtain. And all. That was hard work, making curtains.
When the weavers tried to form a union, yes, the masters tried to prevent it, the mill owners. And it eventually came to a head in 1897 when local weavers, that is the lace weavers, in Muir and Company, asked for an advance of wages of 2 shillings per week. And that led on to the mill owners combining and locking out all the weavers in new mills and employing a professional strike-breaking group, the Free Labour Association. They brought in over 200 foreign workers, mostly Englishmen, to take over in the town, the lace weavers' work. And there were over 24 policemen billeted in the town because of the tremendous fighting and mobbing that was going on at the time. Keir had to come in to try and quieten things down a bit because there was a meeting at the time to consider getting gunpowder from the Galston miners to blow the Blacklegs huts up. And my grandfather, David Mair, wee Dovet in this little portrait here, at that meeting had said to Mr. Hardy, "Look here, Mr. Hardy, it's all right for you, but my neck's been stretched that long that I'd blow them all to hell." And hence the long neck you see in the picture. But really, that was the making of the union. The mill owners won the strike, and they had to go back on their terms and sign a document. But in a clandestine way, they all became members of the union here, and it was a real formation and the establishment of the union. But in the meantime, the community was broken in two. From then on, it was mill owners and workers.
But it was against the second and third generation of manufacturer that the workers held the biggest grudge, feeling that they had little knowledge of the factory floor, simply living off profits generated by the pioneers and 2 wartime booms. But if some bosses treated the worker with disdain, others genuinely cared for the well-being of a community they were part of and kept on old workers long after they served any economic purpose. One of the original reasons for the Valley Lace's success was its reliance on good design. It's a tradition that continues.
Well, mostly your client will suggest a particular style, and from that style we draw the sketch. From the sketch it's transferred onto what we call a draft. This is a draft. And we use coloured paint purely as a code. The colours have nothing to do with the colour of the actual fabric. The red is the heaviest part of the fabric. That's your heaviest yarn. The green is a lighter yarn, and the blue gives you, what you would know as the lacy ties. This ground, for instance, comes out like this on fabric.
And does this all have to be drawn out by hand?
That's traced onto draft paper, which is squared off depending on the gauge of the machine and the quality. And every square has to be accounted for. Leave out a tie, and you're left with a damage on your fabric. So it's important at this stage that the draft is absolutely correct. It's from the draft that the card cutter punches his card. Once we get to the draft stage, we find it correct, having looked over it very carefully. We then send it to the card cutter.
This is a prime example of early industrial technology, the Jacquard card-cutting machine. The operator, Ian Hamilton, reads along each row of the pattern and punches the design onto the cards. The lace trade is a kind of living museum of Victorian engineering, with a lot of machines designed in the valley to speed up the process. This one was patented by Frames of Darvel themselves. The operator is sometimes called a piano puncher, and there's a certain resemblance, though maybe Wurlitzer puncher would be more appropriate to the size of the machine. When the carbs are checked, they're laced together and fitted up on the lace looms in the factory.
Well, the firm I work for has a factory in Spain, and 20 odd years ago I went to teach them how to cut cards because they'd received one of these machines. And when I got there, they were in the middle of a pattern, punching it by hand. That is, they put every pin in individually, and when they got to the end of the plate, they knocked them down with a hammer. This process would take about 6 months to punch a pattern, whereas it would take us 2 or 3 days.
Valley firms also opened up in Scandinavia, the States and here in Barcelona, where in 1905 locals were taught to play fitba by a team of Valley weavers.
It's an awful dirty job, you know. Come out as black as a black man, surprisingly enough. It was a black lad that did it. And in warm weather, it was terrible. It went up your trouser leg and you stripped off, you were like a black man.
Not all the work was dirty though, as lace didn't replace the old lino weave completely. The process was mechanised and it's now known as madras.
Although he has it into his wages being small, yet he can raise his thrifty wife, keep hungry one to war. The chateau runs we speak, oh sweetly may the chateau run, that wins the Guineas breed.
As with the hand-loom lino curtains, there are floating weft threads that need to be clipped away to reveal the beauty of the pattern. When men did this with hand shears attached to their wrist by leather, a callus formed called the clipper's hoof. Marks of identity weren't needed for the blade setters of the machine period. They all belonged to the same families, and they protected their trade secrets jealously. Jimmy Skade is the last of the clipper sharpers.
Well, I reckon that my own family would be involved in the clipping for about 1890, roughly. So you can hear better when the machines are on than what I can when the machines are off. I'm a wee bit deaf outside it, but when these are on, I can hear normal, and I can tell whether a pin or a bit of stick or a bit of weft goes through.
The lass who paid his man is bonny, blithe and gay. In spite of all my skill, she stole my heart away. Went didn't know the hay, but he did on the green. But midst our rocks did play, and wanton and hurry.
When there was a lace queen each year, each factory put forward 2 names of single girls who lived in Darvel. There was a committee from guilds, youth organisations, and from the factories there was 2 representatives, and it was a vote that was taken. The one with the most votes was the lace queen, and the next 6 were her attendants. I had been to the pictures and I was on the way home from there when someone from the meeting told me, and well, it was just unreal, I suppose. Again, there was a working committee who made most of the dresses were made voluntarily. This dress of mine was actually made by a cousin of my mother's who, you know, did it as a favour for her. The rest of the work was all done by a voluntary committee. The streets, the houses were virtually all decorated with lace. There was a lot of lace buntings across the street. It was just a day that families all came together, and you probably didn't see them from one year till the next, and they all joined and lined the streets. We were taken in dressed lorries, floats, right through the town and to the recreation park where the ceremony was held there.
Fashion in the swinging 60s gave a welcome boost to the trade.
Some designs were specifically for dress lace. So therefore, what we termed as our bread and butter table cover, come Brisbane fabrics, were now being used as dress fabrics, and very successfully.
Many firms didn't survive to enjoy these heady days. The 50s and 60s were a redding out period, and only those who diversified into the new warp knitting remain. Why should women wash and starch lace curtains with a convenient alternative available, terroline? Again, the Valley adapted.
Lace weavers used to laugh. They called them toys. Were you watching the wee toys? So they were no skill. They reckoned it was just a wee boy's job watching their terling machines. The demand for lace it fell away for quite a number of years, and still I think there's only about 4, maybe 5 in Darvel, whereas at that time in the 60s there was 19 or 20 factories making lace.
I don't know how many weavers will be left in the valley, but there was 600 at one time, lace weavers. So the output must have been enormous. Borton's in the square, they had 60 weavers at one time. I don't think there'll be 60 in Darvel now, all in Darvel.
I was a lace man all my life. I didn't want to be a lace man, I wanted to be a marine engineer. I thought I've always wanted to be engineer, but I wanted to be a marine engineer. But lace to me was the be-all and end-all.
Today, lace takes over, exported mainly for the upper end of the market, the luxurious interiors of these Swiss ads. It's the terroline knitted in the wee toys that keeps unemployment down in the valley towns. Lace survives precariously as a luxury item in a depressed economy, but the pedigree of the valley weaving makes you hopeful, at least of a change in fashion.